Hey everybody, it is Dak here from the Ed Boys, and welcome to my OSRS 1 to 99 range guide. The goal of this guide is to give you any information that I find is important for training your range. These are not all the possible ways to gain range XP, they're just the methods that I prefer to use. I've got a lot of things written down for this guide, so I'm going to try to speed through it as well as I can while hitting all of that information. If at any point you feel the need to pause or go back, feel free to do so. In this guide, I'm going to start with the gear and the weapons that you can use for range training. Then I'll discuss the quests that you can do to get a little bit of a head start in your range XP before the actual leveling guide starts. After the leveling guide, if you're looking for some more methods of range training, including some money-making options, that's where I'll be leaving them. There's a lot of range weapons to choose from when you're training your range, which is likely going to make this the longest part of the guide overall. At the early levels, I like to use throwing knives since they are fast but fairly cheap. A lot of players use darts instead because they're a little bit cheaper, but the knives are more powerful, so you're going to get some faster XP out of those early levels. So an iron knife is stronger than iron darts, but once you reach level 5 range, you can use steel weapons. A lot of players would then use steel darts because they're as strong as iron knives were. The thing is, you could also use steel knives at that level, which will be faster than those steel darts. Once you hit 20 range, you can upgrade to mithril thrown weapons. You're now getting into those range levels that are taking a little bit more XP per level, so using the more expensive equipment is likely going to be a little bit more noticeable. So switching to the darts instead of knives is not completely unreasonable for mithril. Though if you are doing well in the GP department, clearly the knives are going to be faster. It's going to get you through your cape quicker. At 31 range, you can wield a steel crossbow. This is the point that I switched from thrown items to the crossbow life for a little while. I do suggest steel bolts in your steel crossbow as it is the best ammo that you can use, and it's pretty cheap overall. At 36 range, you can switch over to a mithril crossbow. I'd upgrade to those myth bolts. And in terms of what bolts you're using, it's going to depend on your bank too. Of course, you might have to make a judgment call on that. If at any time it's too expensive for you to use the ammo that I'm suggesting, you'll just have to downgrade a bit. At 46 range, you can now use an addy crossbow. Adamant bolts are fairly expensive, but there's a cheap alternative later, so I'm personally willing to use the more expensive ammo for now because you don't do very many levels from here anyway. Though, if you can only afford up to mithril, those are going to do the job fine. At 50 range, you can jump off the crossbow train for a little bit and work with a magic shortbow. Arrows are much cheaper than bolts, so you should use rune bolts in your shortbow. The magic shortbow also has a special attack that allows you to hit twice in one attack, similar to a dragon dagger. You can use a magic shortbow scroll on your magic shortbow, which is a cheap item from the GE, or costs 100,000 bounty hunter points, and it's going to turn the magic shortbow into the imbued version of the item. The imbued version has better accuracy, and the special attack only takes 50% of the special attack bar, rather than 55%. At 61 range, you can move back to the crossbow life and get a rune crossbow. For your ammo, I highly suggest getting broad bolts, which does require 55 Slayer to equip. Broad bolts are equivalent to addy bolts, but they are a lot cheaper. If you don't have broad bolts, you could use myth or addy depending on your price range, and you can use a rune crossbow for basically the rest of your training, but there are a few more powerful range weapons that you could upgrade to. At 64 range, you can wield a dragon crossbow. This is a big jump in price compared to upgrading to the rune crossbow, but it is a better weapon, so if you have enough money, it's going to help you in your range training a lot. At 65 range, you can wield the dragon hunter crossbow, which is one higher range bonus than a dragon crossbow, but it also has a 30% boost in accuracy and damage if you're fighting a dragon. This is a fairly niche weapon, so it's not that often used for just everyday range training since it's so expensive, but I will be bringing it up a little bit later. At 70 range, you can wield an Armour crossbow. Again, this is quite expensive for the range boost that it gives, but again, it's a boost in XP rate, so if you have enough money, you should buy it. You are only a few levels away from using a blowpipe though, which is at 75 range, and at that point you only really need to use the Armour crossbow for higher level PvM stuff, not just your general range training. The blowpipe is cheaper to buy on its own than an Armour crossbow, but the blowpipe also needs to be charged with Zulra's scales, which is going to add up a little bit more over time. It takes a long ass time to spend enough money on scales that it'll cost more than just buying an Armour crossbow, but you can sell the crossbow back anytime, and you only lose money from the bolts and if the crossbow dropped in price while you had it. You can't sell back scales though, so you'll end up spending a little bit more money in the long run. I do suggest a blowpipe for just about all range training once you have 75 range. The only times that I wouldn't use it would be bossing situations, but I'll get specific on weapons during the leveling guide too. Of course, if you can't afford it, like I said, even the rune crossbow can get you through your range training. I feel that I should at least mention the twisted bow. This is one of the best weapons in the game for many late game situations, which is why it's so damn expensive. And again, it's not really used for general range training, but it cranks on bosses so well that you can get really good XP rates while you camp certain bosses and make a lot of money. Not everybody can afford the twisted bow though, obviously. There's a lot of other range weapons that are useful, like the Dorshan crossbow, the crystal bow, the Carol's crossbow, the dark bow. Even Chinchampas are going to make a little bit of an appearance later in the guide, but overall, this rundown is what I wanted to give you on range weapons. If you still have any questions about the weapons, let me know in the comments section below. Let's get started on that gear so we can fill in all your other equipment. On a quick note, most range gear also requires a defense level alongside that range level, so just in case I miss announcing the specific defense level in there, be sure to check that before you buy the gear. For your chest and legs, you can start with leather armor at level 1, even a hard leather body on the chest if you have 10 defense. At 20 range and 20 defense, you can upgrade to a studded leather body and chaps. 30 range and defense, you can wear snakeskin gear, and once you get up to 40, you can start the dragon hide part of the grind. Green dragon hide is the weakest D-hide and also requires dragon slayer to wear the body, and then every 10 levels of range and defense levels, you can upgrade your D-hides from green to blue to red, eventually black D-hide at 70 range. You can also wear Carol's gear with 70 range and defense, but it has the same offensive stats and is degradable, so it's much cheaper to just use black D-hide usually. If you've got a lot of money to spend, you can also wear the Armadillo gear once you hit level 70. Arma's the most powerful range gear in the game, but it's really not needed to train to 99. In your helm slot, if you're on Slayer task, you should wear a Slayer helm. Make sure that you imbue your helm or else it's going to be worthless for range. The Slayer helm only requires 10 defense to wear and no range levels, but you do need to unlock it with 400 Slayer points. Your normal ranging helms start with a leather cowl at 1 range, and at 20 you can upgrade it to a coif. Then at 30 you can move on to the snakeskin bandana. At 40 range, you could potentially get a Robin Hood hat, but it's very expensive for its requirements, so many people tend to just skip this one. If you have 45 defense, you can get an Archer's helm, which isn't as good as a Robin Hood's hat, but it's way more affordable. At 70 range, you can wear the Carol's coif, which is very cheap, even though it is degradable, won't cost you very much in the long run, and if you have enough money, you could go for the Armour helm, which is one of the top range pieces in the game. When it comes to capes, it's a pretty easy choice. You want to wear an Ava's device. The kicker is you need 30 range to do animal magnetism and unlock any of the Ava's devices. Before level 30, your cape's not a big deal, but if you've got an Arty cloak, that'll be pretty helpful. Ava's weakest device is the Attractor at 30. At 50 range, you can use the Accumulator, and if you manage to beat Dragon Slayer 2 and get a Vorcast head drop, you can wear the Ava's Assembler. The Ava's Assembler does require 70 range to wear, but most people don't get past Dragon Slayer 2 with less than 70 range. These backpacks will pick up your ammo for you, which is extremely convenient for range, and higher level backpacks not only pick up more of your ammo, they also have some better range bonuses, so they'll help you do more damage. There's not that many ranged necklaces in the game. The Amulet of Glory is a good all-around cheap necklace, and the Amulet of Fury is also a good all-around option, but it's a little bit more expensive. If you've got enough money for the Necklace of Anguish, though, it's highly recommended since it is the best in slot ranged amulet. There are a lot of ranged shields to choose from in the game. At low levels, you can use leather shields. These work similar to other leather items, starting with normal leather and hard leather, moving to snakeskin, and then through your dragon hides. The black dragon hide shield is a pretty good ranged shield overall, and it's very cheap. God books are always a good shield option since they do have a nice prayer bonus. The Unholy book has some good range bonuses, but the Book of Law is the best in slot ranged shield for God books at least. The Odium Ward is still not that expensive and has a pretty damn good range bonus, not to mention it's the best looking ornament kit in the game by a long shot. Dragonfire Ward has really good range bonuses, but it's really only worth using when you're fighting dragons and you need that anti-dragon shield, since the Twisted Buckler is a better range shield and is cheaper than Dragonfire Ward. Gloves are also going to work through that same leather system, from regular leather to dragon hide. Other glove options for range include those metal gloves that you get from the recipe for Disaster Quest, from bronze up to Barrows, and Barrows gloves are the best range gloves you can get in the game at the moment. There's not a lot of ranging boots to work with. The lowest boots to give a range bonus are frog leather boots at 25 range and defense, but at 30 range you can go for those snakeskin boots again. God D-hide are your next best really, requiring 70 range, but it's still pretty cheap. You could get ranger boots to upgrade to, but they're very similar price to Pegasian boots, which are actually the best in slot range boots, so you might as well get the best ones for an extra like 200k if you're already to spend like 30 plus mil on boots. For the ring slot, you have really two options. The Brimstone ring is a combination of all DK's rings and Wildy rings other than the Ring of the Gods, but it can't be imbued, so if you have an imbued Archer's ring, that's going to be better for your overall range damage. If you still have any questions about gear, let me know in the comments section below. There's a lot to talk about with weapons and armor, so I tried to make the section as brief as possible while still hitting all those main points, so maybe I missed something you wanted to know about, just let me know. Let's go ahead and talk about quests. Death to Dorgeshin is the only beginner level quest that actually gives range XP, but it would start you at level 13 range. The Horror from the Deep quest does give good range XP without having any ranged requirement, but it is more of an intermediate quest, and having a good range level can help you in that boss fight in there, so it's really not great for getting your range started, but it is suggested to have this quest done later in the guide, so you might want to get on top of this one whenever you can. I have left a link in the description to the wiki's full list of quests for range XP. Alright, I think it's about time to get into that leveling guide. You're going to notice this guide starts off very similar to the melee guide, using low defense monsters with decent health to work with. Levels 1 to 10, I would start at the chickens and lumbridge. I suggest picking up your throwing knives or whatever ammo you decide to use in this section, because you're going to be using a lot of it at low levels, but if you're rich enough to just leave it on the ground, nobody's stopping you. Levels 10 to 25, I would move on over to cows. These are a little bit stronger than chickens, but they also have more health to work with. At 20, you should make sure you're upgrading from your leather top and bottom to studded leather, and then you can wear your coif at this point. You could pick up the cowhides and bank for a little bit of profit, but overall it is faster to ignore them since you can just make up the money later when you have higher range levels to work with. 20 to 50, I would move on to the sand crabs, which are located on the southern beach of the Hosidius house in Zaya. These crabs have terrible defense and they have 60 health, which means they're much nicer for camping out. At 30 range, you should be focusing on doing animal magnetism for your Ava's attractor, and at 31 range, you can switch from your throwing weapons to the crossbow upgrades. And don't forget about your dragon armor too once you're over 40 range. 50 to 61, I would move on to ammonite crabs, which are on the beach on Fossil Island, which does require the Bon Voyage quest. This is the magic shortbow section of the guide, basically. Don't forget that your magic shortbow has a special attack. This will speed you up a little bit, and you should also be upgrading your stuff like Ava's accumulator, and then your blue to red d'hide during the section. Ammonite crabs have the same type of stats as sand crabs, but they also have 100 health, which make them a lot more AFK. And they tend to not be nearly as crowded as sand crabs, which is a bonus. At level 61, you can now use a rune crossbow, and if you have 55 Slayer, you can use broad bolts, which could be the combination you use for getting to 99 range. I suggest fighting Dagonoths in the lighthouse basement, which does require the Horror from the Deep quest. This is a multi-combat area with tons of Dagonoths to kill, so I suggest that you bring a cannon with you too. The cannon is a much more expensive way to train range, obviously, but it's better to speed through your lower levels so that you can use higher range to get your money back faster. There are Dagonoths in here that use range attacks, and there are ones that use melee attacks, so knowing what to pray overhead, you got to be watching a little bit. There's normally more rangers on you, but the melees hit a little bit harder. The thing is, if you have decent defense levels and you bring Bones to Peaches with you, you shouldn't have any trouble taking too much damage in here. You don't have to cannon the Dagonoths if you don't want to or you haven't done the quest. The Lizardmen in the Shazian house on Zaya are a pretty good multi-combat area for cannoning, and it only requires 5% favor in the Shazian house. They also drop seeds a little bit more often than Dagonoths, I felt, so you're going to get a little bit more money back, though you are spending a lot on cannonballs. You could even cannon the ghouls northwest of Canifis, though they're not in a multi-combat zone, so you do have to save spot to get faster XP rates. 90 to 99, I would move on to chinning maniacal monkeys. To get to these monkeys, you need to partially complete the Monkey Madness 2 quest. Using black chinchompas is pretty expensive, so you could downgrade to reds, but they're going to slow your XP rates down, and they won't cost quite as much in the long run. Chinchompas are a unique weapon. They are not only the weapon, but the ammo itself, so you get all of your ammo in your weapon slot, and they have an area of effect attack, so they can hit multiple targets in one shot and get you a lot of XP if you're attacking a lot of targets. It's highly suggested to have the highest ranging bonus you can get and only be doing chinchompas at higher levels, since it's going to be a lot more expensive at lower range when you don't hit as hard or hit as often. Maniacal monkeys are pretty AFK, and the little prayer potion doses that they drop are going to allow you to stay here basically until you run out of black chinchompas. This is very fast range XP, so even though it's going to be expensive, it's going to get you to high range levels very quickly where you can make up for that money. If you have any questions about chinning chinchompas, let me know in the comments section below. A popular alt method is to use the blowpipe in the Nightmare Zone. This can still give pretty decent XP an hour without the same requirements as maniacal monkeys. I just don't really find this method quite worth it for the cost, and Zulra's scales are fairly expensive. It's not just because they're too expensive though, it's just not quite fast enough for how expensive it is in my opinion, compared to just like going back and using a cannon on the Dagonoths and then also using a blowpipe in there. That's going to get you better XP overall, and like I've said a few times, it's better to speed through these levels and make up for the money later. The Nightmare Zone is awesome for low requirement AFK rates and would still be a fairly fast cape for range. I do have a Nightmare Zone guide that focuses on melee, but it's going to teach you how to get into the Nightmare Zone if you haven't done it before, so you could check that out if you're clueless on how to do the Nightmare Zone. If you're looking to make money from range, I have one simple answer for how you should train it: Slayer. Early Slayer levels aren't really great for money, and that tends to turn people away from Slayer, but if you use Slayer to train any of your combat stats to 99, you're going to make bank along the way, plus you get to change up what you're fighting every task, so you don't have to camp out one monster like every single day just getting the same XP. And you'll also notice Slayer gives you a lot of access to some Slayer-only caves, which have a lot more areas that you can cannon and fight things and get a lot of good range XP from it. There's also a lot of bosses that you use range to knock out, and fighting bosses tends to be a lot of money. My easiest example in this one is fighting Vorkath. You can get over 50k range XP an hour while you fight Vorkath, which is not nearly the fastest method in this guide, but it also makes over 2 mil an hour while you do this, so getting rich by the time you get to 99 while not being a really slow 99 is kind of a nice way to go about it. Clearly having the Dragon Hunter crossbow in this situation is kind of a nice boost. Other bosses like the KBD, Saradomin, Armadillo, and even the new Alchemical Hydra boss can give some pretty good XP rates and make a lot of money. This is why I think it's important to rush like 90 to 95 range so that you can use range to make money in the long run. Clearly having 99 is a little bit better than having like 92, 93, but if you're in the 90s in range, you can do some pretty good bossing and make good money off of it. I believe this is all the information I wanted to give in this ranging guide, everybody. I tried not to make the guide too long, so I realized I went fast through some of it. Again, if you need to pause or go back on any of it, at this point, apparently it's go back on any of it, feel free to do that. I believe all the information I wanted to give is in there, so I hope if you guys got any useful information or if you just enjoyed the guide in general, you'll leave a like and subscribe for more content. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. If you have any questions or ranging tips of your own, be sure to leave those in the comments section below so we can discuss. Thanks again for watching, and best of luck with your range grind.